On behalf of my family, my wife Megan, our son Mason, our daughter Caitlin, thanks for coming out to our farm and joining us for this event. This legislation is so very important, not just to our family, but to all farmers in Howard County and all future farmers in Howard County. I think we're all would agree we're very fortunate to live in Howard County, a county that protects property rights, a county full of resources, our outstanding schools, our wonderful, beautiful parks, our communities, and our farms. Farms that provide us with fresh produce, meats as well, that so many of our residents, our citizens of Howard County are taking advantage of. And this legislation is all about protecting that.
I will tell you, this is really, really important to me, and I want to thank everyone for coming out. I also want to make sure I thank Tim Feaga. He's been a great help with organizing everything. Thank you, Tim, for your friendship and help with this. This is an issue, especially when you talk about the tier legislation, what we talk about in a second, is really dear to my heart, and I want to let folks know I am not opposed to preservation. And I think anyone who knows my dad knew that he was a big supporter of preservation, and our farm is in farmland preservation. I know some folks here have farmed our farm for us. And I am all for trying to preserve as much as we possibly can. I think Senator Clark was great on that, and I think other people as well. But there's a difference between having a voluntary agricultural preservation program and having an involuntary agricultural preservation program. I do not support an involuntary program where they take your property without any compensation just because they can. And that's what I said I would fight. I fought it when I was in Annapolis, and I remember I came to the county council twice and testified against what they were doing to the farmers, and I told them they don't have to do this. And I said when I was running for county executive, one of my biggest priorities would be to bring those property rights back to the people of Howard County. And so that's what we're doing. It took us a little longer, unfortunately, to get everything together, but now we're doing it. And I also want to tell you that Mother Nature must agree with us, because what a day to have in January to be able to do this, even though we have a little bit of wind, but certainly it's a beautiful day. Again, I just want to tell you, when I was in Annapolis, they passed that legislation. I guess they called it the Sustainable Growth and Agricultural Preservation Act of 2012, which should have been called the Take Away People's Property Without Compensation Act. And we fought hard to make sure locals had the final say on where to put the tiers, and we did that. We got that through. Unfortunately, the county executive prior to me didn't see it that way. And so we basically, to let you know about the tier property, the tier legislation we're doing, we are basically doing what the county council did 3 years ago. When the county executive proposed the tier legislation, the county council, 4 of the 5 county council members at the time, said no, we want to do it based on what's already been preserved, and let the folks who are not in preservation make that decision for themselves. They passed that bill 4-1. Unfortunately, the county executive vetoed it, and even though they had a 4-1 vote, they didn't override the veto. The 4 county council members who supported that bill back then are still on the county council today. So my goal and my hope is that at least those 4 would be consistent and vote again to support property rights for our folks in Howard County. I think it's also important to note we're not talking about tremendous amount of development or growth or even impact. I believe it's about 30-some, 38, 37 properties that are affected by this. We're talking about 1,600 acres of land out of 94,000 in the RC and the RR district. This is not going to make a dramatic input. I heard someone tell me the other day that some environmental group came out and said, oh, this is going to cause tremendous growth in Howard County and all this kind of. If every single property that is now allowed to be developed as they could have before the previous tier legislation does so, I think the total, if you don't even count the steep slopes and the wetlands and everything else, was like about a little more than 200. 200 properties. And when you count everything else, it's probably well below that before people do that, because some people aren't going to want to develop right now. That's not going to affect our schools. It's not going to affect our roads. It's just going to provide folks with their property rights back again. And what I like to tell people is, you have a situation here where if you're not going to affect our school overcrowding, our schools aren't overcrowded, and I'm sorry, thank you, Blair, and you're not going to affect our roads, the reason we're doing this is because the only person or people it really affects are the people who own that property. People who might want to have college for their children. who want to have a retirement for their family, who want to be able to borrow so they might want to do something else on their farm. We want to make sure they have that ability like they did before. So that's why this tier legislation is so important. So basically what's going to happen is anything that's in tier 4 right now that's not in a rural legacy program or all-rated preservation program is going to be put in tier 3 to allow those folks to make their choice, like my dad did, on whether or not they want to be in preservation. The other thing that I think I want to bring up is we have a couple other aspects to this. It's kind of like a multiple legislation I should say. In addition to the tiers, we're going to be putting in some more right to farm legislation. I definitely want to acknowledge, and I'll bring up in a second, the county council member that I was fortunate to succeed. I didn't do better than him, but I succeeded him back in 1998. Charlie Feaga is here. Charlie, thank you for being here. Charlie Feaga was the first person to put in right to farm legislation here in Howard County, and so we're going to put a little bit in there trying to make it even better, but he's the one that was the groundbreaker for that. And the part of the bill that we're going to put in on that is going to be encouraging the court to require plaintiffs to cover the legal costs, including attorney's fees, in the civil suits against farmers when they talk about that they're violating some noise or whatever else thing. A lot of those, I'm sorry, are nuisance suits that are bothering the farmers. They're trying to cause problems for the farmers. I want individuals who bring those types of suits to be able to have to pay for the cost of that suit, not to put the brunt on the farmer trying to defend their right to be able to farm in Howard County. As a farmer, as not a farmer, I'm definitely not a farmer, am I, Charlie? I live on a farm. My dad was the farmer. I know firsthand when people build around a farm, and a lot of you know this, you get complaints, and they come to where you are, and that's just not fair. They need to realize when they're coming to live next to a farm, that's what's going to happen. It's actually a wonderful thing. You get to smell the beautiful smell of cow manure. It's great. I love it. But you also maybe might hear some noises sometimes, but that's the way things are, and you're actually very fortunate to be next to a farm. So we're going to help farmers that way. The other thing we're going to be doing is working on some setback legislation. The zoning regulation amendment, or ZRA, we're going to be putting in, because right now what happens, as you can imagine, is if you're a farmer, and you're in preservation or whatever, and someone builds or develops next to you, then because they have a house there, now it changes what you're able to do on your farm because of setback requirements, perhaps to build a facility for livestock or something. I don't think that's fair. I think the folks who move next to you got to realize they moved next to a farm. And that farm should be still able to build onto that farm and to do things on that farm that they could have done even before that other property was there. I don't want someone who moves next door to you to stop you from being able to do something that's not really impacting that place. So the setback, we're going to be changing or asking to change the zoning regulations to allow that setback to go away so that farmers can continue to farm the way they always have been, regardless of the development next door to them. I know I've kind of blown through that a little bit, but I want to tell you, this is an important measure to me. Philosophically, I remember I had a meeting early on where we were talking about this after I got elected, and I asked somebody how many properties would this affect, and then someone came in and started saying, well, it's only this amount of properties, you're sure you still want to do this? I told him if it was just one property, I want to do this. This is not fair to people. We need to be a county that looks at people and respects property rights. So to me, this is a philosophical question, one thing that I really strongly believe in. I'm sorry it took us almost 2 years to get this done, but I think we've done it the right way. We've talked to a lot of folks to make sure people understand what we're doing, and I think it's the best thing, it's the fairest thing for everybody in Howard County. So with that, if you don't mind, I'd like to bring up former council person Charlie Feaga to say a couple words and just to really thank him publicly for all that he has meant to Howard County, all he has meant to me personally and our family. I cannot tell you how often my dad would call on Mr. Feaga to help us and our farm, and how many times Mr. Feaga came out to help my dad with our calving. You know, he was a milk farmer, but my dad was a beef farmer, and my dad would say he did it as a hobby, he did it as a living and did it well, but he was always a generous person to our family. But he means so much to Howard County, has meant so much to Howard County, and I want to thank him for his right to farm legislation in the past, and thank him for continuing to support the rights of everybody in Howard County. Charlie, I give the podium to you.
Thank you, Alan. Your dad would be proud of you, Alan, and I don't think I had a better friend than Bob. We did have a beer after we finished delivering those calves, but it was a great friend. When I introduced the Farm Bill, I didn't really realize I was the first one in Maryland. I talked to some people in Farm Bureau, and it wasn't a great bill. I get asked about it occasionally, but it was as strong as we could make it and get it passed, and that's why it was something to start with, and it needs to be changed and strengthened over the years. But But I think what Alan said about the tier system, and I'm glad you said if one property is affected, you do what's fair. I think we need to lobby the county council, ask for their support, sit down and talk to them, and I think you'll get what you want this time, Alan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you very much. The one story I'll tell you about I remember this, and Charlie's told the story before too. He came out one time to help my dad with a calf or something, and it was dark, and they had parked the tractor on the hill, and they're down there working on this calf, and all of a sudden Charlie said he heard this click, 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 click. And all of a sudden they realized that tractor was coming down the hill. And they didn't know what direction it was coming from or where it was heading, but they were going to get out of the way. But fortunately, nothing bad happened. But Charlie's come so many times to save our calves and help my dad. So on behalf of my family, thank you so much, so much.
So I really want to thank County Executive Kittleman for introducing this legislation. I agree just on the principle of the thing. It's extremely important. And no, farmers are, of course, not at all opposed to preservation. On the contrary, there's that old joke about the farmer who wins the lottery and his friend says, "So what are you going to do with the money?" And he says, "Well, I guess it means we can keep on farming." I think that's how most of us feel. Everybody that I've spoken to about this was planning to leave their land that hasn't been sold into the preservation program to grandchildren or great-grandchildren, but to have your biggest business asset just devalued by the stroke of a pen by the county council is really very frightening. It's not something you imagine could happen in America. So I do think that even if it only pertains to one family, it's an extremely important legislation. And I'm also very, very happy about the right to farm add-ons to it. So thank you.
The legislation that you're putting forward about the nuisance, I think, is a precedence-setting piece of legislation that, to my knowledge, hasn't been done anywhere else, certainly not in this state. But the reality for us living in this county is that we conduct our operations through every seasons and day to day in the back of our minds, and it didn't used to be this way when we were growing up, but it is now, that we have to consider who are we irritating today and who are we bothering, and how long will it be until we have some kind of a nuisance complaint or thing that we have to deal with that we shouldn't have to deal with. Our days are busy enough as farmers and as business people that we shouldn't have to deal with someone that is filing a nuisance claim or even just a simple complaint with the county about a smell or an odor or a time that we're operating in the field or taking care of animals. And I really think that this piece of legislation will be something that will be copied if it's passed and adopted and done the right way, that it'll be something that will be repeated across the country, and it is far overdue. I would say that there is a long list of other farm operations, especially on the shore, that would have loved to have something like this passed, and their operations could have either saved a lot of money or have saved the operation itself. So I think this is a very important piece of legislation, and from my standpoint, in where I stand in the farm community, we're in full support of it, and I thank you.
I should have added earlier that one of the other things we've been doing is trying to do the best we can to help the communities understand more about farming. And we've started a farm academy. We've had a couple years of people being able to come out and meet with farmers and talk about farming operations, just so they understand how farms work. Because I think a lot of times people just don't understand what's going on, and they have this thoughts about what's happening in farming and things are going to be hurting them. And I think when they get a chance to sit down and talk to a farmer and go to maybe tour a farm and hear about what activities are going on there, they understand better. And so I want to appreciate, I know a lot of folks here in the farming community have helped us with that farm academy, and we're going to continue to be working on that as well. I mean, it's a real goal for us to make sure that farming can continue here in Howard County. I don't know if, Blair, you have anything else you want to say, Blair? So other than that, I want to thank everybody for being here, and I would ask you, please, if you support this legislation, please let your council representatives know and contact them, and we will we'll keep you apprised. Thank you very much. Have a good day, everybody.